I recently came across a website, and I'll be including the link. It's from randomcollection.info, and it's regarding a couple of books on criminal harassment and coordinated harassment. It's got all kinds of different names floating around on the internet, but I just wanted to not only share this website link with you, but I also wanted to actually read what this page has to say. And the page is entitled David Lawson's Investigation into Organized Stalking, and it's got a date of March 7th, 2009. And it says the following. American private investigator David Lawson spent approximately 12 years investigating stalking groups in the United States and Canada, mainly in the 1990s. He wrote about his experiences writing with these networked community harassment groups in two books. The first was released in 2001, and it was called Terrorist Stalking in America. Then he produced an update to the book, and it is from March 2007, and it's called Cause Stalking, so C-A-U-S-E, Cause Stalking. While group harassment in the workplace is also common, and in this sort of context it's well documented in a book called Mobbing, Emotional Abuse in the American Workplace by Dr. Davenport and Mrs. Swartz and Gail Purcell Elliott. So that's another book, Mobbing, Emotional Abuse in the American Workplace. The community-based counterpart called organized stalking is not well known to the average member of the public. This paper is to share some of David Lawson's findings so the reader can begin to grasp what appears to be a relatively new type of crime, so new in fact that targets of organized stalking have great difficulty getting law enforcement officials to take it seriously. In my particular case, a funny part about that comment is that it's law enforcement that's participating in this, specifically the law enforcement community in Orange County, California. Anyway, continuing. Before sharing David Lawson's findings, it should be pointed out that Lawson's books contain two types of information: his observations and his conclusions. David Lawson's observations of the activities of the community organized stalking groups are a perfect match for the types of harassment reported by organized stalking targets. However, Lawson's conclusions as to who is mainly responsible are puzzling to targets who have read his books. David Lawson claims that foreign terrorists and anti-government groups are responsible for the growing organized stalking crimes. Very few targets of organized stalking see evidence that Lawson's conclusions match the target's experience. Lawson may have discovered those groups operating when he rode with the harassment groups, but anyone interested in finding the backers of local harassment groups would do well to suspend judgment of Lawson's conclusions. And I think what he's trying to say there is that it might very well be that these sorts of harassment techniques, terrorism as far as I'm concerned, are initiated also or utilized also by terrorist groups and anti-government groups. But in my particular case, you can be rest assured that your law enforcement community as well is engaged in this sort of activity. So that it begs the question, which group learned the tactics from which group? Did law enforcement learn it from terrorist groups, or did terrorist groups learn it from law enforcement? Anyway, continuing. Right up front, targets of organized stalking report that lies circulated about the target are what fuel local hatred for the targets. One of the favorite lies being circulated is that the target is a child molester. This is routinely used against female targets as well as targeted men. Other lies are that the target has a serious criminal record, or is into the drug trade, or is a prostitute. So for those reading this paper who aren't familiar with organized stalking, keep in mind that the obvious answer to why would people harass targets who are nobodies is that once lies are circulated, that target is a major criminal, that target is no longer a nobody. As to why certain people are chosen as targets, Target's report shows that whistleblowers and activists are sometimes subjected to organized stalking as a punishment for their activities. Other cases occur when the target is in line for a large inheritance or has turned in a well-connected spouse for criminal activity, such as pedophilia, or sometimes the target just ticked someone who is well-connected to groups willing to do organized stalking. In my particular case, I was working for an American company in Stanton, California, near the corner of Beach and Catella, that was working on law enforcement related projects for interests in Bogota, Colombia. And we worked in cooperation with the Metropolitan Police Department of Colombia, among others. Our company was also working for doing contract work for a project of a company that's based in Garden Grove as well. And that was another vehicle tracking type company that's still there from what I believe. And from what I could remember even back then when we were working on contracts and I was developing these things called calibrators for them, they had ties to local law enforcement already even back then. And if I'm not mistaken, they also already had relationships with the FBI. Anyway, so that was the context in which I found myself a victim of this garbage, because I basically stumbled across the fact that my company was being surveilled for some reason. And we continue on. It says, according to David Lawson, some targets are simply chosen for practice, which is just lovely. It wasn't my particular case because of the context in which I was involved in with this company. So it certainly wasn't chosen for practice, I can put it to you that way. And then it just continues on. It's important to know that people capable of doing Lawson-type stalking really do exist and have been recognized by the field of psychiatry. And then it goes on to have like a little table of contents, and we're going to basically read the entire paper here, so bear with me. Okay, and then it basically gives a series of quotes from the book Car Stalking by David Lawson, and the comments by the person that put together this webpage, and maybe a couple of comments from other people, and I'll be interspersing some comments along the way as well. Quotes from David Lawson, currently available, Car Stalking, except were noted from his original book, Terrorist Stalking in America. Author David Lawson did interview perpetrators, perps as they're called, and targeted people, or targets, and the police. And here's what the author heard from the police he interviewed. It's from page 79, according to this. I also spoke with a few police officers from across the country. They confirmed the existence of stalking groups across the country. In general, they said that car stalking is primarily a civil problem, where the plaintiff has to prove financial loss. They also said that there are free speech and grassroots issues involved. In fact, the police themselves are targets of these groups. In small towns, the number of members in these groups can easily exceed the number of police officers. In general, the police will not talk about stalking groups. One officer did say there is a storm brewing as groups become larger and more numerous. And I'd like to just personally add that perhaps part of the reason why police are not talking about this is because they're engaged in this sort of criminal activity themselves. Continuing, author Lawson explains here how he got involved and began to interact with the car stalking perpetrators. So he says, and I quote, "One day, several years ago, I was sitting in my house and checking out the activity on my scanner. I heard a woman say that she was following a certain vehicle. She gave the location, the make and model of the car, and the license plate number. A few days later, I heard the same woman on the same frequency request backup at a certain location. A few days after that, I heard again her broadcasting the position and details about another vehicle she was following. I listened to other people talking on that frequency, and they didn't give any indication that they were with any government agency, but they were talking about arresting people. On one occasion, on the same business band frequency, I heard someone complain that an African American man was crossing the street. All we could get him for is jaywalking, responded the leader. Leave him for the police. People in the group would discuss where they would go for supper after their shift was over. So I, the author, went too. I listened to a group of people openly discussing various activities as if they were the police. Real police officers were also sitting in the restaurant, listening to them. I later learned that their presence was not a coincidence, and I sure know what he means by that. One man who had supper with the group drove a van marked with the call letters of a local AM radio station. I started listening to it. Most of the guests were people who said they had new revelations about Waco or Ridge or some inside story about government corruption. It's called hate radio. I also heard advertisements for the meetings of a local political group and attended some. At the first meeting I attended, one young man flashed a phony police badge at me. No one paid any attention. Some of those in the audience or in attendance were the people I had seen in the local restaurant. This was my introduction to the creepy world of anti-government extremists, otherwise known as your local law enforcement community as well. I added that part. So David Lawson goes on to explain that he observed extremist groups for several years while living in New York State, Florida, and Canada. He monitored the stalking group's public communications, attended meetings, and rode with them. The author defines the basic reason for being for these citizen groups as cause stalking. Cause stalking means the group is assembled under a leader with a shadowy past for some specific cause. Cause stalking has been used by extremist groups since the early 1990s. This is in quotes now from I guess it's a direct quote from the book. The basic system is alleged to have been developed by the Ku Klux Klan and refined through the years of use. And that's kind of something that sent chills up my spine when I read it, because my harassment occurred while I was employed at this company in the 1990s, and I know that the city of Anaheim and Garden Grove has an unfortunate history of racist criminality, including the Ku Klux Klan, and including the fact that the Anaheim Police Department in the 1920s, they basically had the entire police department fired because they were members of the Klan. And you can imagine how despicable these people must have been, that the very German people of the town at the time had them recalled and thrown them out. So this is German people in the 1920s disgusted with what was inside their police force. And they not only threw the police force out, but they also threw the City Council of Anaheim, California out as well. So this kind of sent chills up my spine when I read it, because the nexus of the ground zero, let's say, of my criminal harassment was centered around the city of Garden Grove and in Anaheim. I lived in Garden Grove. We had a home in Garden Grove, and we worked nearby. Some details about the typical car-stalking recruit. Recruits tend to be blue-collar workers who are at the bottom end of the job scale. They are janitors in apartments, hotels, etc., who have keys to get in any locked door. They are security guards who can let fellow members into places where they would not normally be allowed to go. They are city workers who can, in many cities, follow a target around all day in their vehicles or have a noisy project underway near his target's residence. They are taxi drivers who are a network that is always on the road. They are cable, telephone, electric company employees who can interfere with a target service and spend time on patrol with the group while they are on the job. And this reminded me of the fact that in the place that I worked, there was a certain person that will remain nameless who was kind of a blowhard, and he talked about, and also one of his relatives worked at the Garden Grove Police Department, and he bragged about the fact that he used to, I don't know if he used to work at a cable phone company, but he used to brag about helping to put wiretaps on people's phones for law enforcement. So that's what this little comment here in this sentence reminded me of when I read it. The other thing interesting about this particular employee, he was an RF engineer type fella. And take a wild guess what one of his hobbies was. Yep, ham radio stuff. So it's almost like this web page is writing the history of my life. Anyway, let me go through here and find where I left off. Okay, so those are the author's words. Here are some of a few quotes from the perpetrators themselves from the original book. From the book Terrorism, Stalking in America, here is what some of the people that are involved in this harassment have to say. We are like the police, except we are above the police. We are a citizens group that helps the police. We are trying to alert people in the area about this person, the target, before he gets to do what he did in the last place he lived. And then this is a comment from Eleanor White that's added. All the car stalking targets I know well did not commit any offenses. The stalkers are filled with lies by their leaders. Okay, continuing with the book Terrorism, Stalking in America, when I get the call, and this is again one of the harassers, when I get the call, I go to whatever the address is. It doesn't matter what the targets do, they can never get away from us. Another quote from the book, again by one of the people that are engaged in this criminality. Who are we? We drive the ambulances that take you to the emergency room. When your house is burning, we put out the fire. We are security guards. We protect you at night. You only have electricity, phone, and cable service because of us. We are janitors. We have the keys. We fix your cars. You don't want to mess with us. And in the book Car Stalking, David Lawson provides some details about the motivations of stalking group members, not in the book. And that 25% follow the nominal cause they were recruited under. 25% actually participate in harassment. 75% harass occasionally or not at all, and 10% join out of fear of being harassed themselves. That 10% joining out of fear of harassment is quite interesting, as one of the most difficult barriers in educating the general public about organized stalking is why anyone would volunteer to harass others. Lawson describes recruits to these groups as those who feel powerless, inferior, and angry. Common sense is that naturally such people would be easy to recruit for street and adjacent to a target's home harassment, but I would comment that lots of professionals put us targets down at every opportunity, declaring us mentally ill for even suggesting organized stalking is possible. These professionals don't feel powerless, inferior, and angry. In other words, I think what he's trying to say there is that, yeah, there's a bunch of lowlifes that are involved in this sort of criminal harassment, but you can find just as many professionals as well involved in this garbage. And I can write a book about that one. And you've probably, if you've been following this channel, you've seen me show examples of security guards, even in this current apartment complex of mine, etc., community service type people, etc., that have been involved in this mayhem. And I continue, and I doubt the many utility and city employees who participate feel powerless, inferior, and angry either. Obviously they're employed, etc. So while David Lawson has done a great job, some aspects of organized stalking have apparently escaped him. And essentially, I think what they're trying to say here, and this is from my personal experience, is that this is not just a bunch of criminal lowlifes that have been enjoined in this, that this has been done in participation with some very supposedly respectable people in our society. I would say think Bernie Madoff if you want to have like a image in your mind of what I'm referring to, because you have people that are capable of doing incredible harm while dressed very nicely and expecting everyone to show them respect. Okay, and I continue. One comment Lawson makes is that firemen across the country and even some police officers support these groups, and I can vouch for that, since the principal form of harassment came at the hands of police officers and fire personnel, emergency personnel, in cooperation with criminal confidential informant types. Your Hispanic gang member looking individuals, white people that look like they were pretty much drug addicts, were operating under the assumption that these people were involved in some sort of crime, and they were basically co-opted into this as a way of getting out of whatever problem they had gotten themselves into with law enforcement. So you got those types of people as well. I have heard a number of reports that vehicular harassment has involved an above average number of vehicles that bear stickers of firefighters, or a few targets have traced perpetrator identities to firemen. One target discovered that a number of vehicular harassment cars identified by license number were parked in a police station parking lot. Again, for me, that's absolutely no surprise. My personal take on why some firemen and police might back these groups is that many have a heightened sense of community service. If they can be persuaded that the target has a criminal record, the worst case being that of a pedophile, it would be natural for firefighters and police to help keep the target in line. The author concludes, as explained at a number of places in the book, that the cause the typical group is working toward is mainly an excuse to get the groups together. The main motivation of members who stay with these groups is a sense of power and belonging the group members derive. Having a cause enhances the feelings of power and righteousness, but group members, according to the author, are most concerned with how their fellow group stalkers feel about their work and accept them. Lawson explains the attitude of the typical stalking group member towards the cause this way. Most active group members have only a general idea of the ideology of the group that they don't particularly care. These groups come into being and are run by leaders. Here's what the author says about them in his book, a bit different and more clearly when compared to the original book. Group leaders do have political goals and the belief that the end justifies the means. Lawson describes leaders as considering their members disposable. And that comment there kind of reminds me, and it's something, someone made a comment somewhere, one of these blogs, that you sound like you're me. But one of the things I've always kept in the back of my mind as I've been victimized in this way is that I don't consider myself just the victim of this. I consider the utter lack of disrespect for the trust of your fellow police officers, that the police leaders in this city and county would defecate on the trust of their police officers when they get them to be involved in this sort of garbage. So when Lawson says that the leaders consider their members disposable, it really makes sense. Orange County law enforcement leadership, as far as I'm concerned, has absolutely utter contempt and disrespect for the trust that their police officers have on them. And continuing, Lawson states that some leaders work for corporations and politicians. Lawson states that leaders identify targets but don't directly supervise the harassment group members. I'm sure about that. I've yet to see Stan Nee or Brad Gates and John Welter or Sandra Hutchins in any of these vehicles. Lawson describes leaders as having an air of mystery, having worked for the CIA, NSA, or some other intelligence agency that doesn't reveal information about their employees. Lawson states that this background is likely mythology. And how about the financing for these groups? Although the author states that the pay is low, there are still very large expenses to harass people as thoroughly as targets report. Here an example of what I mean by large expenses. Groups are well financed. They can afford to rent property wherever the target lives. If he drives across the country, he will be followed by supporters of similar groups in that area. If he travels by plane, group members will meet him wherever he lands in the U.S. They may even accompany him on a plane if they know his travel plans, and there's a good chance that they do. Here's what the author learned about their financing, and this is from the book Terrorism, Stalking in America. The operations of many extremist groups are actually financed by corporations, which use them to stalk their enemies or potential enemies. The groups are used as the private armies of those corporations. Some countries kill dissidents, and in others they are jailed. In the United States, someone who is threatening to corporations or industries, like a whistleblower or an activist, or someone who happens to notice that his company is being targeted by law enforcement, that I added, is likely to become the target of an extremist group, or in my case, the law enforcement community. The author makes several statements that these criminal stalking groups not only harass targets specified by the leaders, but are also for hire, a kind of revenge service for those wealthy enough to hire them. These are the two distinct reasons why targets are harassed. The initial reason targets are placed on the stalking group list, then the reason the stalkers keep it up, which always involves lies. Those two reasons should always be kept separate in your mind, and that sure has been the case in my experience with David Lawson's focus is mainly on the reason the stalkers continue to harass targets. And then he comes up with a list of, it says David Lawson's chapter on selection of targets may well be true, but it certainly doesn't describe the thousands of people who don't fit this list of targeted categories. Here are some of the categories of targets. Lawson records and car stalking, abortion clinic workers, people guilty of mistreatment of animals, county clerk and local politicians, police officers, judges, IRS and Treasury agents, civil rights activists, government or corporate whistleblowers. And then one thing David Lawson makes clear in describing the targets is that the ultimate goal of the group is to destroy the targets. Those who have been stalked by organized citizen groups, which are fed lies, report that these groups do destroy targets with great efficiency. Next, let's look at some of the typical operations these groups carry out. Here I have obtained a number of quotes from the original book because I feel they state the situation as well or better than the new book. The first step after a target has been selected is to establish a personality profile, which will involve an assessment of IQ, personality type, and history. A target may also notice being photographed. From his book, The Terrorist Stalking in America, he says the primary characteristic of car stalking is that it is done by large groups of people. A target will always be followed, but he is unlikely to see the same stalkers very often. In my particular case, I've always assumed that there was someone via GPS technology or what have you keeping tabs of where I am. And for the stunt that I've described often, where I could drive from one end of Orange County, California to the other, it's safe to assume that there was some sort of GPS tracking technology to be able to go from one end of Orange County to the other and not see a police vehicle anywhere near you. It implies that, and especially when you consider that I was involved in the GPS business, in the GPS tracking business, ironically. Quite literally, I was working on the police surveillance state, and the surveillance state turned on me, essentially. Many of these groups include hundreds of people. Some authors refer to car stalking as terrorist stalking. Groups do not just stalk individuals, they employ organized programs of harassment, which include break-ins, property damage, yes, assault, and occasionally even death, yes. The children of target are a favorite. My wife and I don't have children. Again, from the terrorist stalking in America, firemen across the country and even some police departments have a long history of supporting extremist groups. Fire trucks can sometimes be seen riding in extremist convoys with their flashing lights turned on and their sirens screaming. They will also race to greet a convoy which is entering their town. The participation of firemen, city workers, and utility company workers helps give group members an illusion of legitimacy and power. And the way I've always liked to look at it is to remember that scene from The Wizard of Oz where behind all that bravado and bloviating was this little jerk of a munchkin pulling all the strings. We also have here from Terrorist Stalking in America, city employees can be used to harass a target in many ways, including tearing up the road in front of the target's home. Employees of pest control businesses who have access to the keys for apartments and those who work for alarm and locksmith companies are also of interest. And I'll reference you to those videos that I've talked about with the pest control trucks. That was a favorite technique, especially in Garden Grove. And the most disgusting example was the video I showed you a couple of videos ago when I was at the gathering of the mothers on Anna Drive near La Palma, and there was that pest control truck. So again, I'm reading this website page and I read this and my jaw just drops. And it's just an absolute and utter confirmation of a bunch of stuff that I've put up on video so far. So I refer you to the video from a couple of videos ago of the Anna Drive December 2nd gathering. again from Terrorist Stalking in America. Groups also attack targets of convenience. These people are selected because they are convenient targets, not for any other reason. These include loners who tend to be more vulnerable to their harassment tactics than those with family and friends around them. Targets of convenience are used for practice. In my particular case, when this criminal act occurred, I was basically, though my brother was living in this home of ours, my parents was in New York. I had cousins here, but we really never really had a real family relationship. So, and I wasn't the type of person, I'd never been the type of person to have hundreds of friends around me, etc., etc. So I wasn't the most social bumblebee in Orange County, let me put it to you that way. So you could in some ways describe me as a loner in and around the time that this started. I've subsequent to this, I've gotten married and what have you, and so, and that's why I consider my wife not only my wife, but I consider her literally a miracle, because in the middle of this hellish garbage, I managed to marry the most wonderful woman you could have, and a extremely strong woman. Continuing on, terrorist stalking in America. In order to establish bases of operations, they will enlist the assistance of neighbors. In many areas, they can do this by intimidation. Those who do not cooperate can be targeted, which includes harassment of their families and damage to their homes and vehicles. And now you know why, if you've been following along with my videos, why I refer to my former home in Garden Grove as Hell House. It's right there in this website. Just read what it says about what neighbors are employed to do, and you'll get a good idea now of what I mean by Hell House, my former Garden Grove home. If they are dealing with individuals who do not know them, they can appeal to their sense of patriotism, and they can offer drugs, friendship, home repair, free taxi rides, and whatever else they have to. In some cases, they may be able to get a key to the residence from a patriotic landlord. I've always gotten the impression that the people that are employed in harassing me in the past and currently, I get a sense that they're mostly people that have been in court or entrapped in some sort of criminal activity. That's just my take on it. But if they are being paid as well, then that just makes it that much more disgusting. And mind you, this occurred before September 11th. So the fact that it continued after September 11th, just as if it needs an additional layer of disgusting, factor that in. Again, from the book Terrorist Stalking in America. Surveillance is conducted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I can confirm that. When a target leaves his residence, they will alert the group either by cell phone, businessman radio. Other members who are patrolling the perimeter to watch for police and other vehicles driving in the area will race to the location to begin pursuit. In small towns where businessman radio is widely used, these activities are a local sport among a small group. Anyone with a scanner can join in. Some targets have reported hearing an announcement on their scanner as soon as they turn their lights on in the morning. Again, from the book Terrorist Stalking in America. In a typical apartment setting, they will attempt to lease, sublet, or otherwise have access to apartments above, below, and on both sides of the target. Yes, Garden Grove Hell House. They will also guard the vehicles of a target in the parking lot. Again, from the same book, the target flushes a toilet. He may hear a car horn honk, the sound of power tool or hammering, for example. There will also be a large number of people coming and going, and accompanying rowdiness and noise. Yes, etc. Again, terrorist stalking, same book. A common ruse used by these groups is that they are citizens groups which assist the police, and they just keeping track of a certain individual for whatever reason. The illusion is reinforced by the case files they carry, which are complete with photos of the target and look like those used by police. During a search of the target's home or apartment, members who are on patrol anyway establish a perimeter around the residence to watch for police vehicles. In the apartment setting, entry will likely be gained through a member of the janitorial service, pest control, or alarm technician, since they have a right to enter. They may even be able to approach a landlord and gain his cooperation after convincing him of their higher purpose. He may also cooperate out of fear. Now I've got questions for the condominium association where we owned our home regarding this. I have questions for the apartment complex when we lived in Anaheim Hills regarding this, as well as this current apartment complex where we currently reside. And on this, I refer you to the security guard videos we've had uploaded. Again, from terror stalking in America, others do not recognize that they are being harassed by an organized crew. They just think that there are a lot of rude people in the world. Interception of mail is standard practice. Typically, targets notice that their mail is arriving late or they do not receive certain pieces. Targets may overhear people at a nearby table in a restaurant talking about certain mail and realize it's theirs, or someone may drive by the target waving their mail at them. This is why when I've sent out emails to this police department and Loretta Sanchez and others, I've told them not to bother sending me anything via the mail, because it more than likely won't make it if it's anything of value, especially anything along the lines of, come on down, we're going to help. Again, continuing on, interception of phone calls is also standard practice. This is done by telephone company employees who support the stalking group for ideological reasons or because they obtain some benefit. And then Eleanor White makes the comment, I'd add to that one of the most likely reasons because the phone technicians are told lies about the target. And I refer you again to my former co-worker. Okay, an objective is to isolate the target from his family and friends. He can tell them about all the strange things happening around him, but they will not understand and perhaps will think he's crazy. Sometimes other members of the family will receive the same treatment. So I brought this up to my brother, and he can recount story after story of strange stuff that occurred with him. And there's all sorts of stuff that my wife is a witness to, especially now. Especially how we can drive from one end of Orange County to the other and not see any police vehicles immediately to our left and right, etc., etc. She was a witness to this Long Beach police officer who pulls in front of us without her sirens on the day we were going to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary at the Long Beach Theater area, and a whole bunch of other interesting scenes. When the target is driving, standard practice is to surround his vehicle and attempt to control his speed. He will not be followed in close proximity by the same vehicles for a long distance. They do frequent trade-offs. Vehicles line up behind the targets to take their turn. Been there, done that, seen that. In many parts of the country, it is common to see groups of 6 to 30 or more vehicles driving around in convoys with their high beams on during the day. This is one of the ways a convoy can be identified. Standard practice is to watch a target's vehicle and its subjects, and this subjects them to damage, including slashed tires, scratched paint, stolen plates. Typically, they would not cut the brake lines on vehicles or commit other similar acts of sabotage, but they drain the oil or antifreeze, etc., etc. In my particular case, my green Toyota Camry, the tires have been punctured, and then to make it certain that I didn't think it was a random thing, another tire on the other side would be punctured a week later or so, whatever, just to kind of drive home the point. I go out to my car as it's parked in the STSS parking lot, and the passenger front window is smashed in, when I knew damn well in the morning when I arrived it was fine, etc., etc. Terror stalking in America. A target will be followed on foot wherever he goes. Anyone can go to the same public places he goes, and they will attempt to get into any other restricted place he goes, including hospitals, places of employment, etc. It's been said that it's possible to go nearly anywhere if you have a clipboard in your hand, and it is almost true. They also like to wear name badges on a lanyard, and some carry phony police badges. Continuing on from the same book, Terror Stalking in America, common harassment tactics used by those on foot include pen clicking, repeated clicking, rattling change. Many tactics are tried and the result is observed. So this is important. Many tactics are tried and the result is observed. Those which evoke a response from the target are repeated, and I've seen that happen a million times. When the target sits anywhere in public, group members will attempt to sit behind them in order to create noise or whatever means, including tapping feet. The objective is to harass the target constantly. But this is an important point. So they're basically trying to figure out what pushes your buttons, and then once they've established that a certain act, or in my particular case, the notion of having people, criminal confidential informants, harassing me with the same green Toyota Camry vehicle is a perfect example. So they understand clearly that that is something that quote unquote bothers me. It's something that's been well documented in these videos of mine, and so it's been sort of like a rinse repeat. Once you establish what bugs the target, then you can continue repeating. The thing that these people don't understand is that in your repetition, you also hang yourself. Again, from Terror Stalking in America, groups attempt to interfere with any business and personal relationships which the target has. Typically, this interference involves character assassination from anonymous individuals and is not usually taken seriously by those who know the target. It can be effective with people who don't know the target. At work, the target would also experience character assassination. If he works in any position where he has to deal with the public, there will be a steady stream of customers who complain about him. If he's a real estate agent, he will have a steady stream of prospects who occupy his time but never make an offer. Let me, and this is now a person named Eleanor White, give you an example of how brutal and serious this character assassination can be. One of our members, who prefers to remain anonymous, moved in with her husband and children to a house which, unknown to them, had been a methamphetamine lab. The chemicals used to brew meth apparently caused distinctive symptoms in the mouth. This family's dentist felt he was helping law enforcement, quote unquote, by reporting them to local law enforcement as meth users. This was absolutely untrue, but the family didn't even know the report had been made and had no way to correct it. In fact, in some places, dentists are required to report suspected cases of meth use. Law enforcement in that area was apparently tied into the citizens group, and the family was harassed for many years. The husband died apparently from exposure to these chemicals. The lady, now a grandmother, steadfastly did detective work and eventually found out about her family's reputation with some help from a policeman who was a personal friend from a different jurisdiction. This policeman admitted off the record that meth mouth can result in people being submitted to citizen harassment groups for harassment. Character assassination is complete and has life-destroying consequences. So there's an example of a completely innocent family, and they were actually victims of the idiots that had lived in this place before. And in a snowball effect, they became a target of this garbage that we've been talking about here on this channel for so long. And as if to add insult to injury, they continued to be a victim, and by no other than law enforcement. A common tactic used by groups is noise campaigns. Group members will drive by the target's residence or workplace, honking their horns, squealing tires, and making whatever other noise they can. They will also make noise from whatever nearby properties they have access to. Typically, they'll make noise when the target goes outside. Group members will also frequently knock on his door for whatever particular reasons they can dream up. In an apartment setting, targets can expect to hear tapping on the walls in the middle of the night, hammering from upper and lower apartments, and possibly the apartments on both sides. They will continue to work on these activities for as long as they can get away with it, aka Garden Grove Hell House and the adjoining two condominiums. Again, from the group Terrorist Stalking in America, it is not uncommon in an apartment setting for a target to hear someone moving from one room as he does from upper to lower apartment, etc. Often they occupy a nearby apartment part-time when the owner is not there and he receives some sort of benefit. A target may notice someone leaving a nearby apartment when he leaves his and arrive when he arrives. This was the specialty of the idiot imbeciles in my Garden Grove home. Again, why we refer to the Garden Grove home as Hell House. In addition, he will often be accompanied in elevators by a steady stream of different individuals who go to the apartments being used by the group. What about the future then? And let me close this review with a chilling quote from David Lawson's first book, Terrorist Stalking in America, reporting what the author learned from some of the leaders. The leaders are starting to balk at exposing their members to arrest for activities which amount to little gain for the movement. They say that anyone who is a target should be killed and not just harassed for years. And enter the story of me almost getting killed on the Garden Grove freeway with a vehicle that deliberately cuts in front of me, and then witnessing immediately afterwards a police vehicle seconds later who doesn't stop to help and flees the scene. So anyway, I look at this webpage and it's literally like this person was writing the story of my life, a story that began under the leadership of Stan Nee's Garden Grove Police Department and Brad Gates' Orange County Sheriff's Department, and the police chief, I believe his name is Gaston, who I believe passed away in 1999 under his leadership as well. And it's a criminal harassment that has continued in a second generation of Orange County law enforcement in the form of Joe Polzar of the Garden Grove Police Department, Mike Corona of the Orange County Sheriffs, and Baker of the Anaheim Police Department. And we are now in a third generation with John Welter of the Anaheim Police Department, and Sandra Hutchins of the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and Kevin Rainey of the Garden Grove Police Department. And it's been 2 years since I've called the criminal bluff of this law enforcement community, where first I sat at the Garden Grove City Council for about a year, and then publicly speaking out about this at the Garden Grove City Council in near the end of what would it be, 2011, and then again speaking at the Garden Grove City Council in January, I believe, of 2012, and then continuing to speak at the Anaheim City Council because we sold our home in Garden Grove, and we're now here in Anaheim. I've spoken at the Anaheim City Council on several occasions, and we've contacted the Congressional Representative Loretta Sanchez and contacted the Los Angeles Division of the FBI via telephone as well. And so my question is very simple. What was said about me? I need to know, because I need to understand which police force said it, because I need to hold the city or county responsible for that police force. I need to hold them accountable. You are operating inside the United States of America, and you were under an oath when you took the job that you took. And there's a whole series of federal laws, specifically 18 U.S.C., that make it a serious felony to engage in coordinated and criminal harassment of a person, much less a U.S.-born United States citizen, New Yorker. And September 11th was a sad day for me, because not only was my country attacked, but the place of my birth, the city of my birth, was attacked. And those two buildings that fell down, for any person that was born and raised in New York City, I was born in the 60s there, I mean, those buildings were like our buildings. And any person that was born in that time and lived in New York at that time, we have memories of that building from when we were children, asking our parents how high it was going to go. We had memories as young adults in high school. And then we have memories of those buildings, showing them to my newly arrived Colombian immigrant wife, and being very proud. Being proud to be an American, and being proud to especially be a New Yorker American, and showing my wife from another country the majesty of those things. So not only was my country attacked, not only was my city attacked, my buildings were attacked, and they were attacked by a criminal racist. And I also knew that we were going to be turning for protection. We were going to be turning to our law enforcement community. But I also knew that there are people in our law enforcement community that can be just as despicable and just as criminally racist as a terrorist. And what happened to me. It began before September 11th, and it continued after September 11th. So that's why this needs to be resolved.